Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Sandra, we can.
Okay. Can you see me? Because I think I'm on a panelist.
I at this juncture can't see you. If your camera is on, I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
You can hear me. My camera is on. Let me see.
Well, you were in as an attendee, not as a panelist, which
Really? Oh,
you
great. So I get to see everyone.
oh, no, you
I want to get in there. Hold on.
Sandra, you should have received
Let me go back to
invitation.
Paola's.
Okay, so do that. But in the meantime, it's 7:03, and we do have a quorum of the committee, and we do have a full agenda, so I want to um, get the meeting going. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June meeting of Community Board 12 Land Use Committee meeting. It's actually our last meeting before we go into summer hiatus, and we will be returning in September. My name is Wayne Benjamin, and I chair land use for Manhattan Community Board 12. Before we get into the agenda items, I would like to have my fellow committee members introduce themselves, but I'd like to first begin by welcoming back to Land Use Committee, Omar Tejada, who's been away from us for a few months, and it's great to have you back, Omar.
Thanks a lot, Wayne. Thanks, everybody. Just feels good to just be normal again, sort of, and be able to do stuff on my own a little bit. So it just feels great to be here with everybody, and thank you all again. And I'll probably say it again at the executive committee again for all of your help and support during this challenging time in my life and my family's life. So thank you so much.
Great to have you back. So that was Omar, who is a member of the committee. I'm going, as I see them on my screen, Vivian.
Vivian Ducat.
Thank you, Vivian. Jim.
Jim Berlin. I'm also a member of the Traffic and Transportation Committee.
Tanya.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tanya. I'm a committee member.
And you're also the assistant chair, are you not?
Yes, that's what they tell me.
Okay.
That's what they put down. The
Yeah.
assistant chair
Yeah.
of land use committee.
I'm going to have to give you homework now. And I see Rosie.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rosie.
So thank you all. We have a somewhat full agenda for land use, and I want to be able to go through it efficiently, but also to ensure that we don't get all the cars honking outside. Go through it efficiently, make sure we have time to discuss it. And beginning with a discussion with Sean Rickenbacker of the City College Bond Center, and this is a continuation of a conversation that we started last December, but didn't have enough time in the agenda to get into it in sufficient detail. But just as background, Community Board 12 worked with the predecessor of the Bond Center to put together the first ever district-wide neighborhood planning and land use study for Washington Heights and Inwood. And that study was completed circa 2007. So it's more than a dozen years ago. And, in the course of, the last few years, we were introduced to Sean on a couple of occasions. And in December, we were talking about the options for potentially, updating that study. And what Sean mentioned is what the Bond Center did for Manhattan Community Board 9 was create sort of a customized online planning platform that is, far more dynamic than having, a paper study. And, the thought is rather than updating our, several hundred page, paper study from 2007, wouldn't it be, more useful to the board as a whole, to each individual committee and to members of the public if we had sort of an online planning platform that was, customized for Washington Heights and Inwood, so that, we could explore things, almost in real time. And so this is an opportunity to continue that discussion, with Sean and his colleagues from the Bond Center, and to devote a little more time to understand what they did for Community Board 9 and what they could possibly do for Community Board 12. So with that, Sean, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wayne. It's nice to see everyone, some familiar faces. So as Wayne explained, for those who don't know who I am, so I'm the director of the J. Max Bond Center at City College. We are located in the School of Architecture. And maybe a little bit of context. I think what Wayne offered is a great start, but again, just for anyone who's new to who we are and what we do. So the Bond Center is a applied research center at City College. And like I said, we're located in the School of Architecture. We're comprised mostly of faculty and student researchers, graduate and undergraduate. We do have faculty that are in different departments throughout the college, namely Colin Powell, engineering, CWE, and some others in social studies. And our focus is spatial and social equity, and we seek to achieve this through research with a focus on producing insight through spatial data and policy analysis. Now, that may seem like a mouthful, but that's where we are focused. And in part, what Wayne was able to just briefly describe, the reason why we are in this business is to try to accelerate the prowess and sort of expertise that lies within communities as they kind of manage, much like yourselves, land use and development issues, and that extends well beyond New York City, as we know. But we started doing this more consistently with Community Board 9, which is very close to our campus. I'm sure many of you know the people there. But we started working with them in 2019. Unfortunately, recently, April Tyler, who was then the Land Use Committee chairperson, passed away unexpectedly. And she was a great partner of ours, but we had been working with her, Padmore John before her, who was the previous Land Use and Housing Chair, and certainly the president, Barry Weiberg, who we're continuing to work with this platform and in some other planning issues. And similarly, they were interested in addressing rapid development in their own district. They didn't have any pre-existing planning studies to work with. And so we were starting fresh with them in that sense. And they had not undergone or were in the process of any rezoning or anything of that nature. So the initiative really was how can they be proactive in monitoring and engaging some of the development trends and be able to understand those so they can be proactive. And what we've discussed was producing a model of tracking spatial information, urban spatial information, similar to what's used by the industry and also by public agencies across the country. And that's a platform called GIS, which is Geospatial Information Systems. And we're going to show you a little bit of that and also show you what we were able to do for Community Board 9 as a collaboration. So we did really ask a series of questions of what their pressing needs were, and how we could then collectively customize this platform, which is really designing some APIs to retrieve some data, set that data up so that it's retrievable in visualization form as a map. And then you can also export that data in table forms. And I'll explain how that's useful. So I'm joined here, you might see in the tile grid of individuals. I'm here with Augustine Mendez, who is a graduate bond researcher. He and I are going to sort of tag team on this brief presentation. I won't take up too much time, but hopefully share what is effectively the essential parts of this application and how it might be useful and how we might work with you all in producing something useful for you. So let's see, I see Augustine. Let's see if we have, Augustine, you want to share to see if you have screen share privileges?
Yes, I'm checking right now.
Okay, okay, great. Anyone have any questions while we load this up at the moment? No?
No, we're good.
Okay, all right, great, great.
So it says it's sharing. Are you able to see the slides,
Yes,
Google Slides?
development site trends.
Okay, great. All right, so I think we're going to start with the GIS website, just to kind of introduce that to you all for those who are unfamiliar. So Esri, which is the parent company, is very well known in the industry. If there are any planning professionals with us this evening, you're probably very familiar with this. This platform is really a really robust tool that both the development and real estate industries, as well as city planning, city and regional planning for that matter, landscape and architecture firms use this platform quite readily. And they have a number of services that we're able to track the trends that exist within the built environment. So you see some titles here just down below: geospatial thinking, racial equity, even COVID-19. They're able to kind of match via zip codes locate that on visualization maps, and then those maps oftentimes contain links to, says my connection is unstable, hopefully I'm still here and you can all hear me, but they often provide links to data reports that you can download and analyze. Slide.
Yeah, your audio sort of fades in and out, Sean.
Okay, sorry, we'll make an adjustment. Someone just certainly, Wayne, if it, and I'll see if I can make an adjustment here. So ArcGIS is one of the tools in the suite geospatial information systems. As it says here, it's a powerful mapping and analytics software. And you might think that we're selling the software package to you. That's not the case.
Sean's.
Yeah.
So,
am I still?
Yeah, you're still skipping a little bit. I'll explain a little bit of that. So
okay,
they do offer.
I'm gonna make an adjustment in the meeting.
So Esri offers ArcGIS as a non-for-profit package to certain groups, and CB9 would qualify under those groups. So once we put the application in, there's an application process. So the community board would be able to access this free of charge in the system. They do a good job of integrating just the desktop software with web interface. So that's a powerful tool. There are other GIS platforms, but their integration, they're not up to this level. This is the industry standard, and we know that this would serve community board the best in terms of being able to run it on the desktop offline, but also being able to take advantage of that web presence, which is really important. It gives accessibility to many users, right? So going back to what Sean was getting at, this would community board 12 would qualify as a non-for-profit. So we as the bond center, we would walk you through the application process, so the community board could access this.
Right. So, as many people know, some of these industry levels software packages can be quite costly. In the case of working with ArcGIS, we've had many conversations, especially with respect to Community Board 9, on setting up arrangements by which this is quite cost effective relative to what you're getting in terms of the package. And the discount, quite honestly, is quite sizable with respect to the kind of industry standard. So what you may wonder is that this package does not come complete. It's basically the backbones of what it is that we provide, and we go in and customize this tool specific to the goals that you as a committee, land use committee, and larger governing board would deem to be the kind of most useful for your goals. Right? So we'll go to the next. If we scroll down a little bit, this just gives you a brief overview, but we'll pause here in the sense that the most useful aspects here is sharing the maps and applications, right? And so even with the original 2007 planning study, as well as all of the planning documents that were shared with the community during the rezoning process, a huge part of that and understanding the built environment specific to where you are these maps. And the information that those maps include. Now, typically, standalone drawings have a very difficult time showing more than one aspect of information. In the case with ArcGIS, we can produce a series of layers that can be turned on and off. For example, providing you a snapshot of vacant lots, providing you a snapshot of any property with a floor area ratio over a certain specified amount. And you get to see these as an aggregate, or you can zoom in on an individual one to get specific information. Very useful tool in terms of collaboration. So if, let's say you wanted to match a transit and or traffic study to the map, you could load that information and see how that overlays onto the built environment. So things like congestion reports and so forth use this kind of software to determine, or at least understand what's happening in the environment. Analyzing the data, typically you need two buckets or two sources of data to be able to compare. And you can do this here. So the visuals, once you click on them, and we'll do a brief demo, will take you often to a data source. Sometimes that data source may very well be a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet. And sometimes it's a direct data source like the Department of Finance, let's say, or city planning, if you're looking for more information about a specific property. And once you've gotten used to this platform, you can then create separate data sets specific to your concerns, right? So again, buildings over a certain size, vacant lots, public property, and even natural resources. So what's happening along the water's edge, as well as within parks. So just a little bit more information. So you're looking again here under the expand your work category. There's developer tools. That's really our role as the center, where we actually customize and develop these applications for your use. Field operations, you can target certain areas. So you can look at the entire district of Community Board 12, or you can zoom in on a singular property. And you can produce workflows. If you set up a scope of work, how that scope of work is performed. So in other words, we want to research X type of properties. We can produce a workflow on how you would do that. And then your output is, again, quite useful in terms of data and maps that you can share with all of your members. This can be shared digitally. You're not walking around with hard paper documents or paging through PDFs. You could be quite specific in that regard. And so just to, again, show, or at least give you some example of some of the agencies and industries that are using this. Clearly, city planning is one of the primary customers for Esri GIS. And perhaps the second would be the real estate market. But you also see here healthcare. So healthcare is tracked to zip codes often. And this is where GIS comes in handy, and certainly emergency management and how you navigate an environment is also useful and finds great use with this tool as well. So I think what we'll do now is give you a snapshot of what we were able to do along with Community Board 9. So we'll go to the next tab here. So this may sound like a daunting task. We're not asking anyone to go back to school and learn new software. This is really fairly easily digestible. We provide you with tutorials. So we actually created a tutorial, posted it on YouTube for Community Board 9 members to take their time at their leisure to understand through a set of visual instructions how they might be able to use the platform. So it's taking a little bit to load here, but it's
all loaded. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. So this is about a minute long. We may not run the whole thing, but and there's no voiceover, but it does allow you the opportunity to follow along in the clicking sequence. So basically the interface is very similar to what you might find on your mobile phone or your desktop if you're using a mouse. And yes, this platform can be used on a mobile device. And what you're looking at is a person theoretically adding the specific layers that they would like to see to the map. And this is Community Board 9. So showing features such as institutions. You can see here it's being highlighted in terms of the description of what's happening. You can zoom in and out here. You can draw information on top of the map that can then be either saved and exported or just used in that particular moment. Quite a bit of tools here. You can make notes specific to an area or to a singular property. And then we'll show a bit more in terms of how you can actually isolate an individual property and click on it and also receive information as we were describing earlier. And we would provide how that information is displayed. So there's something called raw data, and then there's formatted data. We can sometimes format that so that the information you're receiving is sort of curated versus raw data, which you'd have to go through yourself. And obviously you can output these as printed documents, projected sequences, etc. So that was just the tutorial aspect that we were showing you just here. Now we will take you to our actual platform for CB9.
So here we would have a blank map, for example. We customized it for CB9, right? So there's a series of base maps, and then we limited the number of base maps so as not to create confusion, as to simplify the process, right? So if, for example, you wanted to have as a background all the community board districts, right? So you would have that here, and highlighting CB9. We would be highlighting CB12 if it came to selecting CB9. Then you can also do just a simple gray background, some imagery, right? If you want a context. We can also do some imagery with labels. There are infinite amount of number of backgrounds you could choose, but we chose to simplify it just to show the ones that are more appropriate, that would work best with the data, right? So from there you can add your data. For example, we'll go with and so this data is tied to the Department of City Planning, right? They provide the data. So for example, historic sites, we can see this. Once we zoom in, we can click on a specific site. And this is, so the Department of City Planning provides a lot of information with each data set. And here we compile the most pertinent information for CB9. For example, the name, the address. We sorted it out beforehand, so you wouldn't have to, so they wouldn't have to sift through every bit of data. Sometimes it's not as relevant to a project, so we selected the specific relevant information and just made it concise in this pop-up window. So this is an example of city data. And then the marking tool, I think especially for a collaborative effort is important. You can choose, like the video was saying, you can choose your area of interest. Let's say you identified historic landmark that you wanted to propose as to become a historic landmark. You could mark it, and then you could do a series of things where you can, say to whoever the audience is, you can say it here, and you can label it whatever you needed to label it. Potential sites, and then you can just add it to this. And I think this is important because you can communicate with your team, mark up aspects of this, and then once you're done with that, you can print it as the video was showing. I think this is a good way of just communicating what your vision is, what your analysis is, just within this map that is customized for the community board. And then once you share it, you could have that conversation with the rest of the team, right? And they could come back and mark it themselves and say whatever else they want to say. Maybe they have a different site they will be proposing, or maybe joining all these sites to make a new map, right, of the proposed historical sites. And Sean, do you want to talk now about so we're talking about city data. So this is the website that we retrieved the information from, New York City Planning, but we also made maps that have data that is not found on this.
Yeah, we can review that. There's certainly a lot of publicly available data that's relevant to, particularly to land use committees. But as we mentioned earlier, the industry is also using data that is specific to their projects, let's say, and sometimes that data is not readily available, or individual properties don't necessarily always show up on the public platforms. So a real example that we were challenged with CB9 is that many of you might be aware that CB9 has the largest number of HDFCs in the city. So those cooperatives are embroiled in a number of legislative processes at this moment. And so April Tyler and Barry Weinberg asked us if, with this tool being in existence already, if we would be able to take a set of spreadsheets that they had and very quickly locate all of the HDFCs. And Augustine, you can go ahead and run that. And in that process, what they were trying to understand site by site, building by building, was to click on each one of those and link, and the goal here was to link to the Department of Finance to get a quick snapshot of the standing where they were with respect to their taxes and the kind of financial solvency that they may or may not have indicated through those records that are publicly available. So we were able to do this, I think, Augustine, if I'm not mistaken, in about 2 weeks. So by the time we received the spreadsheet, which we asked for, which was simply an Excel format, we were then able to transpose that, convert it from an Excel to a CSV, get this on the map. And again, the relevance here is that a platform like this is quite useful to both look at the total picture while at the same time being able to examine the individual characteristics of a site project. But again, being able to move or zoom in and out, seeing the kind of total aggregate of a development proposal. So in this case, we're all aware with the rezoning of CB12, there's quite a few things that are quite dynamic with respect to the new rezoning. So getting an understanding of how those things play out is certainly important. And this allows you to see them all at once or look at them individually. So I think we're going to move through the next couple of things rather quickly, just in the sake of time. So Augustine, you can go to the next image here. So, again, CB9 had opportunity zones, which was a fairly new thing at the time. They were trying to get a handle on understanding those, what were the ramifications. So once again, we introduced that into the platform so that they can see. A platform like this is really at its best when you are doing comparative analysis. So in this case, we were able to locate the opportunity zones and then turn on an additional layer that would show the vacant land to see if in fact what properties were probably going to receive the most pressure in terms of development or changing hands. So that's another example. And then we'll give you a case study here and begin to wrap up so that we can cover, I think, some of the most important things. You can go to the presentation now, Augustine. So in terms of real life application, right? So development trends that we follow at the Bond Center were making their way in this instance from the outer boroughs, namely Brooklyn, onto the island of Manhattan, and certainly relevant to upper Manhattan and especially along Broadway. And we saw this trend where development firms were purchasing, and you have several of these as well, one-story supermarkets. These are sites that have additional building rights and floor area associated with them. So they're currently not maxed out in terms of their buildable. And CB9 makes an argument along with city planning that clearly they have the fewest number of developable lots out of many of the community boards. And so now the pressure for what would be new development is starting to fall on existing properties that follow a pattern, basically, follow a data pattern. That data is they either are typologies such as supermarkets, one-story banks, and or pharmacies like CVS, Walgreens, et cetera, and typically exist on corner sites, making them highly desirable. And so we shared with them some of the news sources that track these trends. We'll go to the next slide. Went and pulled some data sets on those particular addresses and highlighted them. Next slide. And then produced a number of case studies so they can visually understand what might be coming in their near future as the city continues to urbanize. And so these are what some of those sites look like currently. And they all do follow a very interesting pattern. We revealed that they are, in many cases, corner sites, higher FAR, near transportation. So there's some benefits in those instances. But we wanted to give them the power to, again, be proactive in understanding what could effectively happen here. And even perhaps imagine soliciting an opportunity to meet with the developers prior to the advancements where they're already at city council or city planning discussing these. We can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, stay here for a second, Augustine. So yeah, there's, we don't do this simply on the image. We do set up some criteria with the land use committee to kind of understand what's important as we search for these sites. And it's really the GIS platform that allows us to identify them by creating the criteria. Okay, next slide. So in this case, we continue the case study, located the kind of case study along Broadway, which is the main corridor. Highlighted everything in red that met that criteria between 125th Street and 154th. Next slide. Picked a development case for us to look at in more detail. So again, so they can understand what the transformation of their community could potentially look like as of right. Next slide. I think some of you might know one of our research partners who's now a member of the Bond Center and City College faculty, Hector Torito Picard, who's a fantastic colleague and also the CEO and one of the creators of Vivacity. We've partnered with him and his team's skills to even increase the capacity of what this platform might do. So linking to Vivacity here in this particular case, we were able to take that address, next slide, and bring it into Vivacity. And Vivacity, again, pulls in a very similar fashion. It's data from public sources, and in this case, zoning, and gives you all of the kind of details relative to the site. And we say that we believe this is the most current, but it obviously depends on how frequently the city updates their information on these particular sites. Next slide. But using Vivacity, if you look at what's available, and this is through a series of clicks in their interface. If you were to propose residential, you could see as of right what that might look like. If you were to propose community facility and/or academic programming, the FAR and the bulk restrictions or guidelines change, and there you see what that would look like again as of right, as a kind of quick snapshot. Then next. So I think we're going to end there, but between the what is really a kind of package of two platforms here, but the primary one being ArcGIS, I think what Wayne described at the very outset here is what's really important, is that if there was a significant change between the nature of the output that one as a community could have for their future planning, is that paper documents and fixed documentation serves one purpose, but the fluidity and how rapid the development environment has been moving as of late and how quickly things change, we've decided to embrace this idea that if we can democratize this data and get it in the hands of communities as a platform that they're also using, that could certainly bolster their capacity to be responsive in a way that perhaps those kind of traditional and historical documents could not. But again, mostly everything here can be set up as an output and turned into a document. So we really think it's the best of both worlds. So I feel like we've been speaking for a while, but hopefully we've given you a taste of what this could be like. And just as in closing, it took a number of meetings with CB9, collaborative meetings, for us to kind of finally tease out the best possible package over the cost and over the duration of when we could deliver it to them. And then lastly, we do expect that the boards that we're working with identify members that would work alongside of us and actually engage in the training by which we pass this tool off to you. It would reside on your platform, and we would come in occasionally to provide application design services that might not be within the scope of managing the software or using it. So I see a couple of hands, so I'm happy to take any questions. Wayne, I don't know how you want to.
Yeah, first of all,
that.
Sean and Augustine, let me thank you for this great presentation. I know in December we were a little tight and it got cut short. I think you had another meeting to go to, but this really gives us a much better sense of what you did with CB9 and what you could do with and for CB12. Quick question on the examples that you just showed. So if we're looking at a site and we're looking at what's doable as of right, residential versus community facility, I'm assuming that the user simply clicks that option and the software generates the envelope. We don't have to do anything to generate it. So it's a quick visualization, even if you're not a planning professional.
That is correct. I mean, that's truly the sweet spot of many of these platforms, including Vivacity, and there are some other competitors out there as well. But that's exactly what they do. They produce a representation of a legal envelope that is, as of right, not requiring any oversight or ULURP processes that would otherwise be the case if you were looking to do more.
Great. And I see a couple hands from the committee. First one that was up was Tanya.
Yes, hi. Thank you
Hi.
for this. Hi, how you doing? Thank you for this presentation. First of all, I think this is a wonderful tool. I used something similar. It wasn't as involved as this, and this is definitely much more advanced. It called City Sense, where because I was working on a commercial revitalization project, and I had to input, new businesses that popped up, businesses that closed, and things like that, recording that kind of data. And this is going to my question. My question is, in order for this to be able to be used to its greatest capacity, we would have to ensure that data is being entered, and it's being entered regularly, it's being continuously updated. And therein lies the rub, right? Therein lies the challenge of how to ensure that occurs, because so I wanted to ask, how did you help CB9 work through that, and what are some of the what are some of the ways in which you help them to overcome?
Well, that's a great question, and they had the same concerns, but in reality, GIS, geospatial information systems, does not rely on data in the sense of data analytics. So you are not updating the data that you are seeing. What you're seeing on the map is a representation visually. And if you click to see the data, what is happening is that the platform is going to another site and retrieving that site's data. And therefore, it's the city that we are relying on to be up to date with their data, because that's what you're seeing. So you're really not plugging in anything. Now, if you want it to be more granular, and I think this is what you're talking about, if you, as a committee, wanted to track, let's say, and this is something that we're doing now, if you wanted to track the closure of businesses, right? And let's not talk about reasons why, but if over a certain period of time, you wanted to understand what was happening on the ground, that information doesn't hit the city for a while. They're not seeing vacancies and businesses close. We're not tracking those businesses' EIN numbers. And so you might have a team that is on the ground with paper and pen, writing down addresses. And that can certainly be brought back in as a spreadsheet. And we can identify those properties simply through that spreadsheet. If someone moved into those vacant businesses and opened up again, let's say 3 months later, yes, you and the team would have to update that data. But 90% of the data that we're describing in this presentation is coming from outside sources. And if that outside source is not available, then and only then do we make a decision to create it. In the case of the HDFCs, we ask them to give us the locations, meaning the addresses. We cross-reference that with Department of Finance to make sure it was accurate. And then and only then did we produce and insert that data into their platform. So hopefully that clarifies the difference. But 80-90% of the data that you probably will be working with is already publicly available data that we're just linking to.
That answers my question. That's very great to hear. So
okay, great.
Very, very relieving to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
And the next hand I saw was Omar.
Hi, Sean. Just want to say thank you for your presentation. I do remember us covering this briefly before, and it was nice to see it more in depth now. Extremely impressive what Wayne also pointed out, I was really impressed by the ability to generate what a visualization would look like of a possible use of space. In full disclosure, I mean, it's on our board, but I'm the treasurer, and anytime somebody mentions cost, it piques my ear.
Sure, sure.
Ballpark, doesn't have to be exact. What does this look like? Say, for example, if CB12 were to pursue something like this in terms of cost, just so we can have a general idea.
Yeah, no, so depending on the number of licenses is how typically this works. And we had in initial talks with CB9 convinced them that they may only need one license. All right? So a firm or an agency would need 20, 30, 40 licenses. A school, Augustine, I think, could probably inform us there. We have upwards of 40 to 50 licenses that they can be used simultaneously. As a not-for-profit and an entry-level commitment here, you're probably talking about quarterly $2,000 to $3,000 maximum. And we think we could even do better than that because there's also a kind of grant period as we're building this for you. Obviously, Esri is interested in getting as many adopters as they can. They are the leading software in the nation, and perhaps even globally at the moment. So they're not necessarily in the business of trying to make a lot of money off of the public sector, that is. But and I think they also, given the mission of the Bond Center, understand that there's a community focus here in terms of the ability to equitably distribute information, right? So, we're not unaccustomed to negotiating on behalf of our partners, but those numbers are fluid. So I don't have a final number for you, but we're very confident that it's certainly manageable, far less costly than employing. I hope no one works for a firm here, but an architectural firm or even paying a cadre of students to draft up a plan. And I think the quality and the flexibility and the longevity of what you would be able to use out of it far outweighs that. So yeah, it's, we can talk about cost benefit ratios later, Omar, but I wouldn't be here pitching this if I didn't think it was both affordable and an enormously important opportunity for an organization like yourself.
Was that 2,000 or 3,000 annually or per quarter?
That was per quarter going into, that was multiple licenses, by the way. When we then had, the initial conversation with Barry that you could do this with one. If you give us one person to train, that person is then obligated to train someone else, pass it on basically. And if you guys got really busy, then you could reach out because this would be your own account, wouldn't be hosted at City College, it wouldn't be hosted at the Bond Center. Once we're done customizing it, we pass it off to you. But in that period, ArcGIS is quite forgiving. So, we worked with this and CB9 used it for a year before finally working on the deal to make it their own.
Okay, good. And I see Steve Simon's hand. But Steve is still muted.
First of all, I want to welcome Omar back. I'm thrilled to see him here and to hear his strong voice. I'm wondering whether this, Sean, I'm wondering whether this tool can be used to develop a contextual zoning plan and whether any community boards have used it for that purpose.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they go by different names. There are, I think Augustine showed that you could actually use a satellite photograph background. And that satellite imagery, you can zoom in at very high resolution, not unlike what you may be able to experience on Google as a comparison. You can isolate the lots and or buildings in question to develop and or examine a contextual planning strategy. And again, depending on how much control you imagine to have. So, I'm not going to speculate wildly here, but with some understanding that some of the projects may differ if they are under control of different developers. You can see what might be happening and then adjust those as an aggregate to develop your contextual plan. So that the long answer is yes. Short answer is yes. The long answer is there's a lot that goes into it, and certainly the platform could certainly handle most of what you would look to put into that effort.
And has any board done so at this point, or I may have missed the very beginning, so I don't know whether you've worked with any other boards besides Board 9 in Manhattan.
No, we haven't. We're in similar conversations with Community Board 10. We're just based on where we're located. We have an interest in our neighboring communities. So and those just happen to be also communities that are under quite a bit of development stress. So we're trying to move quickly to service everyone, and the need is pretty great at the moment. But again, as a tool in the hands of members like yourselves, I won't say that anything's possible, but certainly the level of detail, accuracy, and information that you can start to work with on a regular basis that becomes available to you, in my estimation, is a game changer.
Well, I would be in support of, I think the board could probably afford having this tool, and it seems like it would be very useful to us.
Rosie?
I have a quick question. Would this tool be used within our community board website or no?
You could have it linked to the website, but you would go directly to an address, an Esri address that would all, for example, the terminus of your address might be CB9LU, right? CB12 land use, right? LU for land use. And that would take you directly to your account by which you would start to work on the platform that is dedicated and has the customization only for your group. You can make it password protected, so only people on the land use committee could have it. You could make it password protected, so only 1 or 2 members operate it. So this way you don't mistakenly delete stuff or change applications and that sort of thing. So again, much like industry software, if you're using any kind of software platform from 9 to 5, you are probably using it in the cloud, and this is the same case with ArcGIS and Esri. It's a cloud-based service. You sign in, your custom interface greets you, and you begin to use it.
Great. It's pushing 8 o'clock, and we've got a bunch of other things, but let me just ask you, Sean, if CB12, and I'm sure CB12 is interested in moving forward to update our old planning study, but to do it in a way, that uses this tool, what are the next steps?
So the next steps we would meet. I would ideally begin the conversation around what the scope of work is. What are the goals in updating that plan? How does the committee envision the impact of the rezoning on any future plans? Document the as-is condition so that that could be done pretty quickly, actually. And then the specific tools, in other words, a set of concerns and/or objectives that we would ask of you and help you define. We would map that out literally as a kind of logic tree. So in other words, which items would come first in a set of tools, ones that you obviously use more often than others. And then we would set that up, estimate the amount of time that we would need to produce that, and then begin the process. In that process, we would look to have at least 1 or 2 members alongside with us. It's the best way to actually learn the package, and then also contribute to the conversation as we, kind of groom the best features that are most desirable for the group. Process-wise, that would probably it took us about 6 months with CB9, every other week, sometimes remotely. We had a bit more autonomy than we desired at the outset, because it was all new, and that's understandable. But as we do more and more of this, and some of our other research partners that we're working with, we've streamlined the process a bit. So yeah, 6 months is a good benchmark. We also like to have it coincide with the academic terms, so that the students are picking up this kind of new skill set as well. As we are in the School of Architecture, Engineering, and even data science have been collaborating on us on some other projects as well that are really combining data analytics and the built environment. So this is just one of those tools that we're now ready to kind of export and get out there in the hands of users.
Right. I completely agree with the comments that Steve and Tanya and Omar and Rosie have made. I see Community Board 12 being very interested in this. We always are coming up with questions about schools or parks or affordable housing or historic designation, and being able to look at that in sort of in real time, spatially in a way that makes sense is just invaluable. I see the Land Use Committee as being the point for moving this along, but I think the initial meeting would probably be with the Executive Committee, because you get that section of the various committees. So we're not speaking for parks, and we're not speaking for housing. They're bringing to the table what are their goals and objectives, and we're making sure the tool can handle that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. You may recall, and when we presented this, there were 4 categories that Esri highlighted, and that was city planning, real estate, healthcare, and I think, what was that 4th one? Might have been transportation. But my point being here that clearly there are other committees that will benefit from this, and the customization goes well beyond just land use. Health is certainly a factor here that can be mapped. And so, yes, it transcends the individual committees. It's, again, the entire board's responsibility to kind of feed us the hierarchy of where we start. But yes, it has uses across the board. So that's a very good point, Wayne. And I'll just end by saying that the tool in and of itself is sort of like a living document. Right. So you do get to see things relatively real time, but as a living document, the ability for it to update itself. So my last point here, because I know some people get very concerned about the data aspect. If it's linking to outside data, it's an automatic update. So it retrieves the site. And if the site has been updated, you see the updated information. And that is perhaps the kind of gold standard across the board, as we, for most of us, our lives are just being digitized as we live it. And so in this case, the environment's digitization is in part something to wrestle with. We're just looking to help communities do that.
That's great. Well, once again, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Augustine. When I retire, I'm going to come and work for the bonds.
Awesome. Oh, I love it. I love it. Perfect.
My fingers in there. So the next item on the agenda is a presentation by our friend Sandra Harris and the plans for Columbia University Sports Center in Inwood. And Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for having us this evening. I'm going to briefly introduce the team that we have here today, And we will have our architect and engineer present on the tennis center building, and also an update on our East Dock project. So our team members, we're still here. We have Edward MacArthur, who's our Vice President for Columbia University Capital Project and Management and Planning. David Sasser is also here with us, and he's our Executive Director for Capital Project Management. Olivia Friedland, who is a project manager, Senior Project Manager here at Capital Projects at Columbia. Julie Novell, who's also a project manager with us at Columbia. And we have Stephen Sefton, who's a principal at Perkins and Will, and who is the architect for the tennis center, and Cassandra West, our principal GCA engineers for the East Dock. And we will ask Stephen to begin our presentation for this evening.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Sandra. I just wanted to introduce a couple more folks who we do have.
We still have.
Well, so Sandra, you should send me a list with all of these people so we get them accurately for the minutes.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm seeing everyone now on screen. So we have Eric, Eli, everyone from our, okay, why don't we, let me just put it on view here so I can see everyone, our gallery. We have Stephen Figueroa, also from our, and Eric, Eli. Who else do we have?
We have Ellen Lehman from Fried Frank. And then
I see Ellen, okay.
And then we also have Tyler Hinckley, who is also with Perkins and Will, our architect. I think we caught everyone.
Okay.
God, Wayne, I think they
We
believe.
took over the meeting. We don't usually do this, but yes, you have a full quorum from our end, Wayne.
Okay, so let's proceed.
And I'll send you the names for the minutes as well.
Thank you.
Sandra, are we ready to
Yes.
present here? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, Sefton. Yeah, Stephen. Mhm.
No worries. I'm going to share my desktop. Give me 1 second.
Let me see here.
Is everybody seeing the Columbia University slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. 1 second. I'm just moving around some buttons on my screen. All right. So today, obviously, we're going to talk about the replacement tennis center project on the Baker Athletic Complex that is at the end of West 218th Street, adjacent to the Columbia University football stadium. There is currently an existing air-supported structure that was essentially a temporary structure that has been up much longer than temporary conditions or that the facility was initially intended to accommodate. It's adjacent to Muscota Marsh Park, and it's used by the varsity tennis team as well as club members to the tennis facility. It's, if you haven't been to this site before, it's adjacent to two rowing facilities that are on the site, which are on this kind of lower area of the site, surrounded by some adjacent parking in the Muscota Marsh just to the bottom of that area. So the beginning of this project really started with an evaluation and assessment of that existing air-supported structure, and really was the basis of considering it both programmatically, energy use, architecturally, and also programmatically related to the use of the team itself. We evaluated systems, the components that are to serve the tennis team, such as locker rooms, storage facilities, coaches areas, competition, as well as amenities for spectators. All of those components are well undersized related to any of their peer institutions. Specifically, there are no Ivy League institutions that play their competitive matches indoors. They have outdoor matches. So this facility is very unique and some would argue detrimental to the kind of ability to host and play competition within the Ivy League conference as well as across Division I athletic. The site is a challenge as well. It's lacks accessibility from both 218 all the way to the front door, mostly due to the age in which it was built or the era in which it was built. There are only steps. There are really no accessible ramp conditions to move people in and out of the building. And then the exterior envelope, the air supported structure continues to have problems just maintaining its kind of continual need to be repaired, as well as the structure itself just ending at the end of its useful life. So that really has led us to reconsidering what would be the right facility to build in its place. These are just some views. Again, if you're not familiar with the building, some views of the existing structure. To the right is the entry of the building with some gravel parking in front of it, some locker rooms, and then the dock that's out front of the building we'll be talking about in a little bit. A little summary of the project program, both starting with site and the building itself. Some of the key features that are being improved with the building, the new building. So there will be accessible site circulation, both access from 218 down to providing a sidewalk down to the actual new front door of the building, reconfigured parking, and also providing adequate service access to the building. Additional green space is being provided. There's our new riverfront courtyard that helps to connect and extend Muscota Marsh and allow for a kind of completed circulation pattern from 218th Muscota Marsh around to the front door of the building and back up and out of the site. There's on-site stormwater management. And then we spend a lot of time looking at the challenges related to sea level rise and resiliency, building on the waterfront. And that was a big part of a resilience strategy that we developed with the building. The basic program of the facility are 6 indoor courts, just like they currently have, and then 6 outdoor courts, which are actually on the roof of the building. So 6 inside and then 6 outside to have the ability to have those competitive matches outdoors, which they don't currently, can't currently accommodate. Varsity tennis locker rooms, lounge space, meeting space, training areas to basically take care of the athletes. Club locker rooms for club members of the facility. A small fitness room that opens out to that riverfront courtyard, coaches and staff offices, spectator seating, viewing areas with enhanced sight lines, meaning people with disabilities will be able to see in a seated position and have ability to see the game from different vantage points throughout the facility. The building will be LEED certified, and there's multiple components that we've been looking at from strategies to make this as sustainable as possible. What you are currently looking at is a site plan of the proposed facility. It's kind of rotated a bit. You can see the true north arrow on the left-hand lower corner of the building, but essentially in the same position as the current building. Matter of fact, the footprint is a bit shorter than the current building, and therefore allows us to create more of a sense of arrival, a front door, which you're seeing at the lower kind of corner by number 1, that's the main entry. And then developing an actual green space with accessible paths that allow you to mitigate, navigate across from the parking area, which is number 8, up across the green to the front door and then through the building. So at the lower level of the building, it's fairly simple, straightforward in the sense that I'll walk you through the front door at number 1. There is an elevator adjacent to the front door in the lobby that would take you up to the roof top courts. And then there is a circulation zone, number 5, that runs essentially north-south along the edge of the tennis courts that takes you up to an upper level, a viewing balcony for the spectators. Also at the lower level are two club locker rooms, and then the small fitness area that opens out to this exterior courtyard or plaza space. The 6 courts are grouped in 2 threes, and there's a central spectator area between those 2 groupings with spectators on each end of the building.
Go
Yeah.
back to the other slide, please.
Sure.
So if you're in a wheelchair, how do you get to the entrance of the building?
If there's a drop off right here, so I would wheelchair up and then back and then into the building.
So that circular area represents a landing?
That's a landing. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. There is also, if you were coming from Muskota Marsh or coming in front of the row buildings, you could actually navigate to this end, and that would also get you up and then through to the front door. The idea being, when you look at kind of an aerial of this, is that there's a new sidewalk that runs down from 218th that gets you to the front door, can loop you around and then back out. Right now, there is no sidewalk. If you've walked that area, it's just a street, and there's nowhere for people to walk. So now we're providing an accessible walking area path to the front door, and then around and then through and back out.
And when you're looping around back out to Muskota Marsh, are you walking through a parking space to do that?
This is a parking area. That's correct.
No, but at the very end, is there a dedicated path, or are you walking through a parking space?
It's not a dedicated path, but that is not a parking space area right now. The parking, if you can see these parking spots, they sit perpendicular against this building, against this edge. So this is you could say it's a dedicated zone for people to walk, if that makes sense. But you can see the first parking spot starts right at.
And is
where
there
my
a reason
cursor-
why it's not being shown in such a way that it's more obvious that that's a dedicated path?
Just because all of this is treated in the same manner, same material, that it's not. We just determined that it was better to keep that all of that area to be a permeable surface that water could drain, dealing with that stormwater issues, as well as any of the flooding issues, to keep this all the same permeable material throughout.
I'm sure there are going to be questions about accessibility and accessibility at the waterfront.
Sure.
So the team needs to think about what's really happening there and what it means.
Sure.
Steve, do you have a question for now or for later?
Well, you know what? This is not a long presentation, so I'm happy to answer questions as we go, but I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. And then if you want to wait to the end, that's okay too.
Okay, no,
I can hold the questions.
That
okay.
way, at least you can get an overview of the whole building, and then you can
Okay, thank you.
dive into a couple. I'm sure you'll have multiple questions.
Yeah.
So the plans that you're looking at the top of this page is the second level, which is essentially the team locker rooms, the varsity team locker room space, a meeting space, coach's office, and then a balcony that wraps around the northern side, or the water side of the building, that allows viewing down to the courts. And then the lower plan is the rooftop plan. So this is the elevator and stair that gets you up to that upper level. And then there's a viewing area, elevated viewing area here all the way along that same north edge. So in some ways, the exterior rooftop mirrors what's in the interior, as far as the tennis court layouts, and then elevated areas that view back to the tennis courts themselves. I'll share with you a couple of views of the interior of the facility. This is in the main lobby, looking, actually, if you were kind of sitting in the reception desk, looking out towards the waterfront, straight ahead on the right-hand side, and then the main entry to your left-hand side. And then the courts, the 6 courts to the right-hand side of this drawing, as well as that elevated level. That balcony that you're seeing are the entryway into the players' locker room areas. And then this is a view at the spectator balcony level, looking back down across the courts. One of the kind of the key features, and you'll see it in the exterior of the building, is that the building is wrapped on both the north and south with translucent and clear glazing to allow and maximize as much natural light, but also views out to the waterfront. That the existing building, the big bubble that was there, obviously had no connection to the waterfront, and that was certainly something that we felt as the broader team with the university, that's something that needed to be capitalized on. And then this is a view, an aerial view, kind of hovering above the 6 outdoor courts, looking down at the courts themselves, the elevated spectator viewing area that wraps kind of in a U shape with a central viewing area between the three court pairs on each side. There is a 12-foot tall windscreen wall that wraps around the entire facility that not only protects play from the wind, but obviously keeps balls and protects individuals on that rooftop area. This is a cross section. On the lower part of the slide is a cross section, transverse cross section through the facility. And what you're seeing is a dashed line of the existing bubble. So basically the rooftop courts are at the kind of the apex or the top of the air supported structure, about 44 feet above the grade or the entry level or the interior courts. And then there are lights that are above that rooftop court. And then that shows you the relationship of the existing stadium to the right-hand side of this slide. And that, you know, the building, the tennis structure obviously is significantly smaller than the stadium or the stadium lights that are fairly significant, fairly tall. So this is a much shorter, smaller structure than the football stadium. What you're seeing on the top portion of the slide is an elevation kind of from the waterfront. And again, it's to show relationships. The stadium itself is dashed in the background and the lights of the stadium are dashed. And maybe one thing to pick up on this is you can see the building kind of layers up in a very resilient base, which is a masonry base, and then an upper level of metal panels and metal screens to protect the building with this band of vision glass that looks out towards the water. A couple comparable slides here. One of the existing structure. Currently, the air supported structure has all of its mechanical equipment sit right along the waterfront. We've elevated those out of visibility off of the ground, both to protect them from any possible flooding in the future, but also to get them, of course, out of any line of sight from the public. And then this is the proposed facility in an aerial view looking down on the site. So this shows the rooftop courts as well as the masonry base that wraps around that site. And then this is a little bit of a lower level, eye level view from the water looking back at the building. I think this is a better view of how the building's related to the waterfront and the dock. And I think that is the summary of the design presentation. Olivia, did you want to just walk through the timeline, or do we want to take questions? Or I think this is the last slide, if I'm correct, for the tennis center.
Yeah, I can just give a quick overview of the timeline. As you see, I gave some milestone dates here. Plaza Construction is our contractor. And right now we're estimating 16-month construction, start to finish. Right now we are starting our utility disconnects in hopes that we'll have all of our permit sign-offs to begin demolition the first week of July. And then about 16 months after that, you can see that that would give us substantial completion in October of 2022. We had a few slides to address the dock. So Wayne, I don't know if you want to address, or Sandra address comments on the tennis, and then we can proceed to the dock, or if you'd like us to present the dock.
Well, I mean, we have two questions from the committee on what I guess is the tennis portion. So let's hit those first, then move on to the dock. So Steve was first. Steve?
All right, so I have two questions myself. The first one, Sandra and the rest of the Columbia team, if we could hark back several years ago to the discussion about the Campbell Sports Center and Muskota Marsh. If I remember correctly, the dividing line between Columbia's property and the Parks Department's property runs maybe right through the tennis bubble, or was it through the two smaller buildings to the south? Did you have a slide that shows the boundary line between your property and the Parks Department's property? And at this point, I should probably disclose that I work for the Parks Department.
Ellen, do you?
Stephen, do you have a sense of the line?
Well, the property line, as far as we've ever seen it, runs right along the waterfront. When I say the property line, the Baker complex property line. It really runs right along this fence line.
All right, because I guess the dock is in Parks Department property.
That's
Right,
I think you're
right.
correct there. That's
Mhm.
correct.
Okay, so the boundary line is right close to the waterfront, all along going down to 218th Street?
That's right. It runs really almost where this fence line is right here. You can see that little dashed line that sits right along that green edge. That's the fence line. And then everything, out from that is in the water essentially.
So the white area is that underwater?
Depending on the time of the day, but yes, essentially. There's a rip and a kind of a sloped stone area there.
Okay.
Down into the water.
All right, so nothing you're doing here impinges upon Parks Department property?
No, we have not gone beyond the existing property line in any of the areas.
Okay, my second question again harks back to the extensive discussions surrounding the Campbell Sports Center project. So, and maybe Ryan Coate can also chime in on this. So does this project trigger any of the mitigation requirements because of waterfront zoning?
I can take that. So the waterfront zoning requires that any development on a waterfront block needs a waterfront certification to show compliance with the requirements to provide a waterfront public access area. So that was triggered in 2011 with the Campbell Sports Center, and this committee reviewed an application to provide that waterfront public access area, which is the Muskota Marsh to the south of this site. This building is technically also a development requiring a certification, but the certification will just confirm that that waterfront public access area already exists on the site.
All right, so but that would have to be confirmed, I assume, by city planning?
City planning, right? City planning will issue a waterfront zoning certification confirming that there is already a waterfront public access area on the site.
And that nothing further needs to be done.
Right.
The Muskota Marsh is considered part of this site?
It is, yes, it is part of this zoning lot, and it is the approved waterfront public access
So
area.
the zoning lot extends all the way basically to the end of 218?
It does. There's a portion of, and this was approved in 2011, there's a portion of the marsh that is on city-owned land, but the large majority is on this zoning lot.
Yeah, because the presentation actually did not have anything to show the actual zoning lots. So I do recall going back to the discussion of Muskota Marsh. There was a lot of back and forth in terms of what's on city property, what's on Columbia property, where's the zoning lot, if there were any formal or informal agreements, 100 years ago. So,
Right, so Muscota Marsh is about 22,900 square feet, and of that 17,793 is on the property owned by Columbia, and another 5 is on city-owned property.
Vivian?
Hi, I just wondered what the interaction with the public was, like how close the public can get, if there's any visual, can anybody watch anything? What can you see? I mean, I know you could see out, but what can you see in? And is there any invitation of the public into this?
Hi, Vivian. My name's Eric. I work with the athletic department. All of our home matches are open to the public. Anybody can walk in and watch a home match. They are not ticketed events in any way. The club portion of the tennis center, as it is now, will continue to operate the same way, which is anybody in the neighborhood who wishes to have a court to play tennis can purchase a membership. It's not exclusive to Columbia folks in any way. And then the third part is that we have, for some years, run camps in the neighborhood, and we've not run them always in the bubble because it's actually too hot in the bubble in the summer. But it is our intention to continue running tennis camp programs in the summer for children in the neighborhood, and that will be in this new facility.
What about the sound? And then I'll shut up about the sort of air conditioning, HVAC. Is that contributing anything?
I would not expect that to be any louder than the current conditions. And Stephen can talk a little bit more about how we've attenuated some of that, but I would not expect that to be any greater than it is now.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are insulated units that are actually in a concealed screen well to just over the program area of the building, but they're completely concealed. They will be less noisy than the current mechanical system that's out there on the site now.
Jim?
Thank you. I basically have a comment, and I don't mean it to be negative. And in fact, if you want, you put on I think it's like either the final slide, the one that shows the building from the water. That one, right. I mean, in some ways it's a magnificent building, but it is in fact visually quite massive. Now, to do what it does in the shape that it is, that's probably what it has to be. But, I just, am commenting that, visually it's obviously far more massive, I think, because it's rectangular to my eyes than the tennis bubble was. But, and again, insofar as you attempt, and I think it's actually visually quite striking to make this massive thing as attractive as possible. That would be good. But again, it's real big, from my point of view.
Are there any other questions from the
Yeah,
committee? Sally?
yeah, I have one, it's Wayne.
Actually, I think it's Sally, then Tanya.
Oh, okay.
This is a massive building. I guess my question is, the community benefits agreement is running out, and you say it's your intent that this will be open to the public. How can we guarantee that it is open to the public?
Sally, so I'll respond to that. So with our agreement, there were some aspects of that agreement that ended last month. We
Right.
have since revise that and continue our commitment to open the facilities to the community and its uses. And that agreement will be, the recommitment of the agreement has been shared with the community board and the neighbors and will also be posted. So I can definitely share that document with the committee as well.
Well, who
The
would,
commitment continues in terms of keeping our spaces open and available to the community.
so Sandra, when you say it was shared with the community board, who at the community board was it shared with?
Okay, so upon the culmination of the May 31st agreement, we sent a letter to your chair, to Eli and our local elected officials, informing them of the agreement and our intentions to continue to provide some of the community amenities that have been extended as a result of the agreement.
I think it would be useful if you would also share that with the land use committee, because
We'll do that. Mhm.
it's news to us that it was renewed, and sometimes there's a delay with things getting from the office to committees.
Okay.
And then my other question, I guess, and this is for Steve and Sandra, is how the timing of this is going to work with the reconstruction of the nature center. There seem like two major projects going on at the same time, both at the north end and Woodhill Park.
Sally, you mean the nature center or the marsh?
Well, basically what y'all are doing here, which I guess starts this summer, what's going on at the nature center. I just, I'm not a construction person, so I don't know how that works, but it seems like these are both fairly major projects going on at the same time. And I'm not sure how that impacts in Woodhill Park. Steve, do you have any comment?
Well,
It's the timeline. I'm not sure if the timeline is the same, but it's Steve.
well, I don't know if we have a firm timeline on the nature center project, but certainly it would appear that it would overlap with this one. But I think of the nature center project as being a much smaller project, and I would certainly hope that this tennis center project would not impact Inwood Hill Park. We will have to talk to Columbia about that, but I would hope that all of the staging and all of the truck traffic would enter and exit through Baker Field and would not affect the park in any way whatsoever. I don't see why it, frankly, I don't see why it should affect Inwood Hill Park. And I certainly have no, I certainly have no desire to hold up the nature center project because of this one. So I don't think the two should clash. I don't think there should be a conflict.
Okay. Tanya?
Yeah, I had a question about the membership. And I have a reason for asking the question, but anyway, the membership, how much is the memberships to the club?
Tanya, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm happy to send you that information. We're looking at the pricing structure now because the tennis center is closing. When I have a new one, we'll be happy to circulate that to the board and to any of the population who needs it.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because I just wanted to make sure that even though, yeah, you have the tennis camps in the summer and people can attend, the home matches and everything, I want to make sure the memberships are affordable for that there's access in terms of memberships with people in the community, especially considering how you're expanding all of this and the type of just real estate that you're taking up in the community, wanting to make sure that the community, and that means everyone in the community, not just the privileged people in the community, have access to use the club and be able to use the club. So hopefully you'll be able to work, some sort of range in there, where it will be affordable.
That's an interesting point. So when this was discussed many years ago, I thought there was in fact a rate for community residents that was discounted.
That's correct.
That's correct.
There will be in the new facility. Again, I don't know what those rates are as I sit here in front of you because with the new facility, we're tearing up everything and starting again. But there will, Tanya, I hear your request. It is heard, and I will make sure that's part of our discussions. I have no reason to believe it wasn't going to be part of our discussions, but it will be part of our discussions, and we'll make sure we share that back with this group.
Right. And in terms of the real estate, building sits on, it's sitting on the real estate that the tennis bubble currently sits on.
Right.
Correct.
It's not expanding where the tennis center will be. Anyway, so it is ¿qué hora es? It's 8:36. So what I'm taking from this is, this is a presentation to update the committee on a project that is already, set to go. We've been talking about this presentation for several months, but at this juncture, my sense, Sandra, is you're just giving us a presentation on this project. And there's nothing that you are asking of the community board.
Correct. And again, my apologies. A lot of that delays, as I indicated, is because we needed internal approvals before we can come to the board. We also want to just take a few minutes. I know we're running a bit behind to just give it.
Oh, no, I said at the beginning that we had a long agenda. So let's wrap the tennis. So let's talk about the dock.
Thank you. So Cassandra.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm here today. I am the principal engineer responsible for the design and reconstruction of the crew dock that is adjacent to Moscato Marsh. At this point, the dock is currently closed, but it had previously been used, and the future dock will be used by not only the varsity crew team, but as well as the local community club and neighbors. The dock is located, as you can see, adjacent to the old clubhouses and just to the north of the tennis bubble. So as you're looking out towards the water from the new tennis structure, you're going to see the new dock facility. Next slide. So as part of the New York City Parks Department inspection schedule, they had performed an inspection of the dock and given a report to Columbia. Once Columbia reviewed the report, the condition report that was provided by Parks Department, they conducted an independent engineering structural review of the dock and the pier itself, extending from the gate out through the gangway and then the existing floating dock system. This was completed in the fall of 2020, at which point in September of 2020, the dock was permanently closed. It was deemed in an unsafe condition for its users, and it was already in the process of being designed and permitted to be reconstructed. But because of safety reasons, the dock itself was closed to the public and to any users at this point in time. Next slide. This slide is actually showing what the new gangway decking and the new dock system is going to look like. It is a larger structure. It's extending farther out into Spoot-and-Dival Creek. It's going to allow for easier usage by the end users and the clients and the neighbors to allow access beyond the current mud line. So it's a lot more friendly, and it's extending that gangway. So it's a bit larger with regards to extending that T structure along the alignment of the Spoot-and-Dival Creek. So this is the current configuration. There are no changes to the current decking and the current composite decking where the gate is. This new construction work starts at the gate and then goes out into the water surface all the way to the end of the dock. And we've also included a couple of what you would call dolphin piles to assist in keeping some of the ice flow during really difficult winters away from the dock to hopefully extend the dock's life. Next slide. Oh, that's it. So super brief on the dock, but I'm here and happy to answer any questions with regards to the dock design and the pending construction.
So what are the environmental impacts that result from extending the dock out further? What did you have to study? What did you have to do and get approval for?
We actually went through your pretty standard permitting processes with regards to the Department of Environmental Protections. They look at the footprint before and the footprint after to evaluate what we're going to be putting in. We also contacted the Army Corps of Engineers. But mostly, since this is going out and a majority of the footprint is actually just overtaking what's there existing, what they're doing is just looking at the new footprint that's beyond the deck and evaluating how that could potentially impact the environment. At this point, we have a majority of our permits in hand, but we are still waiting for one more. So,
Steve?
Yeah, again, I have two questions. So Cassandra, is the footprint, it looks like the footprint is larger than the existing dock. Is that not the case?
yes, it's slightly larger at the end of the dock at the T. So it's extending slightly to the north and slightly to the south. But you can see the footprint beyond. There's a shadow where an aerial photograph was taken, where the existing dock was actually covering some of the mud line. And we've taken that footprint and actually just turned it almost 90 degrees. So it's really a negligible amount of new footprint that's covering the mud, the marsh area.
So is the New York State DEC okay with that slight increase in the footprint? They're not going to.
Yeah, they haven't raised any objections at this point, no.
Oh, okay, you're very good. So my second question really is, what is the timing on the construction? You know, this issue came up at our general board meeting about a week ago. And so there is a lot of interest in the community about when the dock will be available once again. So what is the timetable?
I'll let Columbia answer that.
So right now,
Hi, this is Julie.
go ahead, Julie. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Pending some permit approvals by 2 agencies. And once we have those permits in place, we're anticipating the construction to be December. Again, this is pending permit approvals, but that's what our anticipated schedule is. We do have a contractor on board, Trevcon Construction, who's a marine contractor. And we've been working, with all of the agencies and with parks directly to try and get our permits placed.
So I wasn't clear, was that, did you say December?
Right now, we're anticipating the construction to be starting in October and be complete by December.
Okay, thank you.
Again, pending our permits are in hand, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Rosie?
A question, just because as Steve mentioned, this was a topic that was brought up in the general board meeting. What were the safety issues as to why this was closed down?
Oh, that's a good question. So it was a couple different things. Actually, the dock had been, it had really essentially the floating dock itself had sort of exceeded its useful life. So the way that the dock pieces were all interconnected, they were requiring an abundance of maintenance, and some of the connections had actually failed. So the steel and how the steel was connected to some piles and then attached to the dock, those were actually falling off. So at that point, we felt that the dock itself it wasn't safe for the public to go out there and or members of the Columbia community to be out on the dock until it was repaired.
I think
or replaced, and the repair was going to require almost the same amount of work as the replacement. So they moved forward with it.
Okay, and I think this would be great if you guys mentioned it to the community or like announce it somehow, because there's a lot of people that are under the notion that this was just closed down just because you guys want to close it down, not because of safety reasons. Thank you.
So Rosie, I just want to point out that at the time of the inspection and the closure, we did share with the community and posted relevant information. I have been in communication with some of those members and just sort of reiterating the safety reasons why the dock was closed down. And right now, trying to work with them in terms of getting the permits that we need so that we can keep on schedule.
Yeah,
For the,
if I heard correctly, initially it was New York City Parks who provided a report saying the dock was deteriorated and unsafe, and then Columbia did an independent one, but the initial report came from the city of New York.
Correct.
Anyway, Sally? Sally?
Yeah, sorry. My question is, there's nothing that can be done temporarily so people can have access to the dock or this summer?
We did consider that. Julie, did you want to expand on that? Because we did consider the possibility of mobilizing a temporary system.
Right.
But the temporary system
Right,
was
so
going to
we did
require.
review that with the,
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, Cassandra, I was gonna say, we've gone down that path with Parks Department, asking for a while about if there's temporary docks that we can install or something else. And they said it would take the same amount of regulatory review, so this process would take just as long, unfortunately, for a dock there.
Okay, thank you. So, Sandra, just a reminder, if you can, I would say, if someone could send us this presentation so we have it, or I have it for reference, and also the list of all of the team members who are, present for this, so we can get those names correct for the minutes, that'll be great. I would like to now move on to our next presentation, which is going to be led by Matthew Spady, who happens to be one of my neighbors. But it's a presentation on the proposal to expand the Audubon Park Historic District, which is something we've talked about off and on for a few years, I think. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Wayne. Yes, quite a few years. Could you confirm for me that I am showing the slide and not the slide plus my notes?
Just the slide. Your notes are still secret.
Excellent. Otherwise, everyone could read along with me. So thanks very much to the Land Use Committee for allowing me a little bit of time to talk to you on behalf of the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance. We are a grassroots organization dedicated to preserving, maintaining, and celebrating that winding stretch of Riverside Drive between 155th and 162nd Streets. Before I get into the rationale for extending the Audubon Park Historic District, let's spend just 2 minutes looking at how that actually came into being. Back in 1999, my neighbor John Esmond began work on a request for evaluation to designate 13 buildings as a historic district. There were 12 Beaux-Arts apartment houses east of Riverside Drive and the Berla Levy House at the corner of Riverside Drive and West 158th Street. I worked with John on researching and preparing that RFE. We sent it to LPC, Landmarks Preservation Commission, in 2003 and included that map you see there on the screen showing the existing Audubon Terrace Historic District and our ask. That ask, ours was primarily focused on the apartment buildings that complemented the existing architectural style in the designated Audubon Terrace Historic District. So in 2007, while LPC was considering and researching our RFE, Community Board 12's Land Use Committee conducted a comprehensive land use study that Wayne, you mentioned earlier in the evening. Among the proposals in it was an extended Audubon Park Historic District that would encompass Riverside Drive's entire winding path between 155th and 161st Streets. CB12 passed several resolutions supporting a historic district and shared all of them with LPC. Now, in 2009, LPC did designate an Audubon Park Historic District that included our original RFE and a portion, only a portion, of what CB12 recommended. Members of the Land Use Committee were under the impression that when time permitted, LPC would expeditiously review and act upon that full proposal. So since then, community members have asked LPC to extend the Audubon Park Historic District several times, with the row of houses on 158th Street. And more recently, we've asked for an individual designation for 857 Riverside Drive, which is the oldest house in the neighborhood. LPC has refused all of those requests. However, we're encouraged by the equity framework that LPC announced in this past January, as well as a groundswell of support from our community and our elected officials. And so the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance is working on an RFE for an extension of the current historic district that would be rooted in CB12's 2007 request. We plan to submit that RFE at the end of this month. Now, that equity framework, in case you're not familiar with it, focuses on designations representing the city's diversity, especially in underrepresented areas. And we believe, actually, we know that we fit those criteria. Manhattan north of 155th Street fully illustrates the diversity that one of our more famous residents, the late Mayor David Dinkins, described as a gorgeous mosaic of race and religious faith, of national origin and sexual orientation. Manhattan north of 155th is also undeservedly underrepresented with landmark designations, both individual and historic districts. Just have a look at the map there. On the left, and this map, by the way, is from LPC's own website. It's called the Discover New York City Landmarks Map. On the left, you can see a preponderance of designations in the affluent, predominantly white neighborhoods south of 110th Street. As you move northward, they diminish and they dissolve into a wasteland north of 155th, which is the map there on the right side. We have 16 individual designations, including both the interior and exterior of the Marsh Jamel, the Audubon Terrace complex, a museum complex, and then 3 residential historic districts. Each one of them is among the smallest residential historic districts in the city. So we are presenting LPC an opportunity to correct this inequity in Northern Manhattan and fulfill Chairperson Carroll's vision of a more equitable LPC landmark preservation designations. The extension will increase the number of designated buildings in our long underserved area. It will also expand on represented architectural typologies in the historic district. It will highlight the area's complex racial history, and it will celebrate Northern Manhattan's long history of diversity. So let's take a moment just to look at our built landscape in this area, how it contributes to a sense of place along this stretch of Riverside Drive between 155th and 162nd. We have this winding serpentine Riverside Drive that disrupts Manhattan's grid between those two streets, 155th and 162nd. And it creates this very distinctive streetscape. The apartment buildings and the row houses in the extension area are all designed in variations on neo-Renaissance, Renaissance Revival, neo-Gothic styles, and they feature highly intact facades despite their ages, ornamented with things like shields and sills, fluted columns, swags, festoons, and so on. Most of the apartment buildings date to the first decades of the 20th century and are works of architects Samuel Katz and Harold Young. Note here in these images how many of the building facades adapt themselves, or the architects adapted them to Riverside Drive's serpentine path. As in the current Audubon Park Historic District, the apartment buildings in the extension area are uniformly of a tripartite vertical composition, which more simply put means that they're divided into 3 parts that correlate to the base, shaft, and capital of a classical column. A few, like 812 Riverside Drive there in the center, rest on a stone base. Most, however, have other architectural features to delineate their compositions, such as belt courses and sill courses. Although the buildings in the expansion area have passed or are approaching their centennials, most are remarkably well preserved with ornamentation and their cornices still intact. Also included in this expansion area are 3 sets of row houses. This group on West 158th is the work of architect, builder, developer John P. Leo. He built the Western 8 in 1896-97, and his business partner John Liliendahl built the Eastern 4 in 1897-98. The houses have undergone some modifications, as have buildings in designated historic districts across the city, but they remain a cohesive group representing Leo's work. We also have this group of 6 houses on the corner of Riverside Drive and 158th. This historic photo dates to 1899. It's in February that year when the addresses of these buildings would have been the Boulevard Lafayette. That's Audubon Park, the historic Audubon Park in the background. The builder for these houses was Francis Schnug, and the architect was Louis Enser. Here are some images of those houses today. Again, mostly intact with their architectural features mostly intact. At the northern end of the extension area is a 3rd set of row houses, mainly from the 1890s. Excuse me. The earliest 3 at the bottom left are at the northern end of the block. They date to 1895 and are the work of architect, developer Lawrence Viher Jr. 859 and 861, those are at the top right, date to 1897 and are the work of Jardine, Kent and Jardine. And then 863 Riverside didn't come until a bit later. That's 1920 and the work of John F. Knubel. Just beyond this row of houses is the northern edge of the extension area where we have the River Arts Apartments, originally called the Riverside House Apartments. These date to 1951. The architect was Arthur Weiser. One of the best known residents here was our late Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell. Then we also have in the proposed extension area, the River Terrace Apartments. This is the newest building in that extension area. It dates to 1964 and is the work of architects Samuel Paul and Seymour Jamul. These apartment buildings, the River Terrace, towers above the surrounding buildings and is a visible part of the landscape from almost every spot in the existing district and the extension area. In the upper right, just for your interest, there's a photo of the groundbreaking ceremonies for these buildings. This is a Mitchell Lama building, by the way, back in April 1962. At the cultural center of the proposed extension is 857 Riverside Drive. There it is present day on the left, and a well-known photograph from 1939 by Berenice Abbott on the right. John King built this house in 1851 on land he purchased from sugar refiner, Methodist minister, and abolitionist Dennis Harris, who had begun buying and developing land here in northern Manhattan in the late 1840s. The wooden structure, which is the oldest continually inhabited house in northern Manhattan, is in the Italianate villa style and similar to those that the Audubon brothers, Victor and John, were building as they converted their family farm Minnie's land, which was adjacent to this area, into suburban Audubon Park. King sold the property and the house back to Harris in 1852. He held it for 2 years and then sold it to his friend, his business associate, and fellow abolitionist, John Newhouse, in 1854. Newhouse lived there until his death in 1877, and his family members continued living there until 1893. Together, Harris and John Newhouse helped develop Lower Washington Heights. Harris built a sugar refinery on the Hudson at 161st Street and ran steamboat service to a wharf there. His refinery on Duane Street, by the way, was a known stop in the Underground Railroad, and we have absolutely no reason to think he would not have used this new refinery farther up the river for the same purpose. Harris also built some houses aligned to the grid, just like Richard Carman was doing in Carmansville. That was on present-day Amsterdam Avenue. Harris and Newhouse also founded Uptown Manhattan's only abolitionist church, with support from various neighbors who shared their anti-slavery sentiments. The direct descendants of that church, by the way, is North Presbyterian, which now sits on West 155th Street. The refinery, the wharf, Harris's home, and the original churches are, of course, all gone now. The only thing surviving from this abolitionist community is 857 Riverside Drive, which you can see there in the center of the photograph with the lantern or the cupola on its top. Now, whether this house was actually ever used to stop in the Underground Railroad is not certain. However, let me quote from a letter that the Upper Riverside Residents Association has recently received from Fergus M. Bordovich, whose book Bound for Canaan, The Underground Railroad and the War for the Soul of America is nationally recognized as the history of the Underground Railroad. And this is just a small quote from his letter. Harris's involvement in the Underground Railroad is well documented. The comparative isolation of his Washington Heights properties argues for their utility as a protected, easily guarded way station for fugitives who needed to be gotten quickly out of Lower Manhattan. Harris's ownership of a steamboat strongly suggests that this vessel could well have been used, as others were, to ferry fugitive slaves, since riverboats were the primary means to move freedom seekers northward. So that's the center of the cultural story for this extended historic district, but the story doesn't really end there. In the 60s and 70s, African-American families like the Baileys, the Carters, the Johnsons, and the Scruggs reclaimed these residences on 158th Street, converting them back from multifamily and SRO residences into single-family residences, all the while working against the insidious practice of redlining. They formed a block association to gain strength through cooperation, and they maintained that block and moved it forward for future generations. Also, the Mitchell Lama building there, that program dates to 1955. It had the double purpose of affordable rental and cooperative housing for moderate and income families, but it also encouraged financial and racial integration, not just of the building, but of the neighborhoods surrounding the building. The River Terrace Apartments, which were part of that program since its construction in 1964, has been home to numerous noted New Yorkers, including, most notably, David Dinkins, New York City's first and only Black mayor. So sitting on land that was once part of John James Audubon's farm and later part of suburban Audubon Park, this building is bound to the historic district historically. It's physically omnipresent as part of the streetscape, and architecturally, it's significant as a 20th century answer to housing needs. Culturally, it's a symbol of the ongoing struggle for racial inclusion, equality, and justice. Now, we have strong support for this extension of the Audubon Park Historic District. Our press releases, our press conferences have been well attended and covered by the media. We have strong support from community and preservation groups. There's a list there on that slide. We also have strong support from city officials. And of course, we would like to include the support of Community Board 12. I invite you to look at our website if you want further information on this. But in summary, expanding the existing Audubon Park Historic District will fully realize the neighborhood's architectural journey from farmland to cityscape. It'll bring attention to this abolitionist community that was active in northern Manhattan in the mid-19th century. It'll preserve the oldest continually inhabited wooden structure in northern Manhattan, and it will create a designation that celebrates New York City's diversity in an area that is less represented by landmarks. And as I said, we invite you to visit our website, saveriverside.org. You can find news articles there. You can find information about our press conferences. You can find the RFE that we sent to LPC about the house itself. There's a virtual walk of the neighborhood called Ferry to Freedom. And there's a lot of other stuff as well. We're updating it continuously. So again, thank you, Wayne. Thank you to the committee for giving me this time to talk to you about the work of the Upper Riverside Residents Alliance. I'm happy to answer any questions. And Vivian Ducat, my neighbor, who is also working on this project, is a member of the committee, so she's available to answer as well.
Thank you, Matthew. And if you could send me this presentation so we have it for reference, that'll be useful.
Sure.
And I can then circulate to the committee and the board the address for the website so they can access that at their leisure. Just one thing, early in your presentation, you said that the community board was under the impression that LPC was going to move expeditiously, to expand the Audubon Park. It's not that we were under the impression, we specifically asked them
Right.
in the resolution we passed supporting designation of Audubon Park to either expand the district or to designate an adjacent individual district that would include, Riverside Drive, north of 158th Street, basically to capture the rest of the area that we recommended back in 2007 be included. So it's the work that you've done is actually building upon the recommendation that the community board and lands committee made, more than a decade ago. And what is unfortunate is you're doing the work that LPC has failed to do. But we appreciate the attention that has gone into it, because as we said back then, it's not just, the architecture of the buildings that is of interest. It's this whole urbanization of a part of Manhattan that was assumed based upon, the grid, part of Manhattan that would never be urbanized. It would not be urbanized in this century. And, how the expectations changed and how the area, in fact, urbanized is part of the story we want to tell. And each era of development is part of the story. This expanded district captures the whole story. The district as it is now is part of a conversation, but it's not the whole conversation.
Exactly, Wayne. Since I think there's still a few folks from Columbia on, and there was an interesting thing that's come out of our research, that the land west of present-day Broadway between 160th and 162nd, which had originally been a mansion that Ambrose Kingsland built, was sort of frozen in time from 1872 until the turn of the 20th century, because some trustees of Columbia had bought it, thinking that Columbia was still down, I guess it was 41st Street, had bought it with the intention that Columbia be able to use that to develop for a new campus, which I just think is really sort of a fascinating little tidbit of history.
I see Steve Simon's hand.
Yeah, Matthew, I just want to say you are absolutely amazing. I get the impression we could just turn on a switch and you could just go on and on without pause, without any hesitation, and give an unbelievably detailed history of the neighborhood. And it would really be an oversight on our part if we did not acknowledge that you are the author of a book recently published, well received, The Neighborhood Manhattan Forgot, where I'm sure we could read, and I know that we can read in greater detail everything you have just presented to us. I'm wondering whether or not one of the arguments we can make in support of the extended district would be to point out the distinctive character of Riverside Drive, and as you pointed out in your presentation, and how the buildings molded themselves to the curvature of the drive, and how this was the original drive before the viaduct was built. And what we have right now is a district that lops off half of that original drive. That we should be talking, I think, about the full length of what was the original Riverside Drive in our neighborhood, and the remarkable way in which the buildings mold themselves into the curvature. I would suggest that would be another argument that you could use.
It is, Steve, and we are using that, because as you saw on that map that I showed earlier, and sorry I turned off the slides, but on that map you had this really interesting path, which, as you say, was the original Riverside Drive, that stops halfway. And by extending the historic district, we would continue it the entire way. All of it is really an interesting streetscape, just because it's that winding path and because it's cut off by the outer drive. And I think that anyone who lives there feels that sense of place, even though you may not identify it and think about it every day. It's just it's omnipresent.
Okay, well, if you can, I would make that another one of your bullet points.
How about the fact that Sandra Harris grew up on?
I know, I keep smiling, and thank you, Matthew. It's all that history, and it's amazing. It's amazing, and it's still home. It's a beautiful place. It's beautiful.
Oh, is it your mother still there?
Yes, we still own the building, Steve.
Oh.
And you know, Matthew, that house, as I was a little girl looking over the fire escape, I said, one day I'm gonna live there. Guess what? I can't afford it. But it's like the light of the entire block for all the kids in the area as well. Yeah.
The Wooden House, 853rd?
Yes, yeah.
I see a hand up from, is it John Rumley?
That is his name.
John, I think I've allowed you to speak. Can you unmute yourself? I see you, Jim. John?
No, that I don't need to speak. I'm sorry.
Okay, Jim.
I just want to make well, first I want to make a very positive comment along the lines that Steve made about what we just heard. And it wasn't just what we just heard, but some of the pictures, since I don't live quite near there, were, you know, a revelation of these treasures that we live among, and probably we should, well, we're doing our best to make sure they stay like that. But I see an irony too, because the current state of this old historic building, the one that Landmarks refuses to landmark, you know, it's historic, but currently it looks real bad. And then personally, although River Arts and River Terrace are very historic, certainly as you pointed out in being Mitchell-Lama and the important people who live there, influential people who live there. Architecturally, I think those buildings are awful, especially that really massive thing. So I just thought that was very ironic. But again, thank you for your talk. It was wonderful.
It is ironic, and I can't disagree with you about looking out my window and always seeing these sort of big buildings there. But it's important to remember that landmarking can be for architectural, historical, or cultural designations, not and, or. And that's why I think that those buildings are, as you just pointed out, are important for the designation, because they carry on the story of our racial history and our evolution from a time when this land was actually worked by enslaved people to a time when African-American families were preserving the houses that white owners had let go on 158th Street, to the point of our first African-American mayor coming from a building in our neighborhood. So it's a long trajectory, and those buildings are culturally and historically part of it, if architecturally a bit.
Right. Well, that's my point. And also, of course, you know, they sorry to interject, but they represent, again, in I think many people's views, you know, really about as, you know, uninspired architecture as you can imagine. And again, that's how it was then. You know, they were Mitchell-Lama. They couldn't be built with all the bells and whistles because they would have cost too much.
Yeah, well, but the reality is, you know, architectural taste, shall we say, change over the years. And, you know, if you look at some of the criticism of, you know, neoclassical architecture being applied to bathrooms in park structures, and I did some research for a book on skyscrapers, you know, many years ago. I mean, what we think about now, oh, isn't that lovely building? You know, folks are saying this is a utilitarian building. It's a bathroom in a park, and you make it look like a temple. That's ridiculous. And, you know, that's the time when people were thinking about, shouldn't the form and function of a building have something to do with each other, as opposed to just, you know, dressing it up because you want to take a temple you saw when you're on vacation and use that now for a woodshed in a park. And, you know, there's this discussion, and I remember even, you know, Max Bond talking about this, you know, when he gave a lecture about sort of the integrity of it. So if you look at River Arts, or if you look at River Terrace and the time they built and what they do, architecturally, you might want to think about what they're saying as opposed to taking those buildings and, slapping on some, architectural detail, make it pretend that their buildings are from the 1800s, because, they're not. And what I find interesting, if you look at, the AT&T building, or what used to be the AT&T building, when it was built, it was kind of the laughing stock of the architectural community. You took a piece of Chippendale furniture and blew it up to the size of a building. And then suddenly, oh, no, it's a masterpiece and you can't change anything. I wonder if any people remember what they thought about the building when it was new. So things change. But, I guess the question is there an ask of the, community board? Interestingly, my uncle lived in one of those.
Harold, right?
Uncle Harold, yes, on 158th Street.
I just
Yes,
want to comment, I still laugh at the AT&T building.
Yeah, I know, but if you've seen any of the discussion recently, when there was some, talk about modifying, the ground floor and enclosing and doing things, oh no, you can't touch it, it's a masterpiece. They didn't think it was a masterpiece when it was new at all.
No, neither did I.
Anyway, Matthew, going back to you.
I was just going to say, yes, the ask is that since we are going to be submitting this new RFE for the extended historic district, if we could get a resolution from the Land Use Committee supporting that request.
Is there a motion to support the expanded Waterfront district?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So for committee members in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Oh, that hand?
Oh, great, that makes it easier. Okay. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Are there any board members present? I see Sally. So everyone put their hands down, please. Board members who would like to vote?
Yes,
So you're in favor?
yes, I am.
Are there any other board members present? No, I don't see any. So 1, 0, 0. Any members of the community who would like to vote, you are free to do so. Once again, if you could raise your hand using the raise hand function. I see 1, 2, 3. Any, okay, you can put your hands down. Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, so there we have it. And when do you propose to submit the RFE?
We're looking at the end of the month.
Okay, so you'll be submitting it after the general meeting, which means you could submit it with the resolution.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks, committee.
Thank you, Matthew.
So keeping it moving. This is a long land use meeting. On the other hand, we're getting business done. We have 2 presentations from the Department of City Planning, and these are 2 additional text amendments. We dealt with a couple last month, and this month we have a few more. The first one is the citywide Fresh 2 text amendment, and I know some of the land use members, Jim and Steve, maybe Vivian, were on the committee when we dealt with Fresh 1. And then the second one is city physical culture establishments. And once again, I think, Steve and Vivian and Jim recall when there were a couple of Planet Fitness establishments that, opened, and in order for them to do so, they needed a special permit because of probably regulations dating back to the 1970s. So I think, these 2 are to some extent continuation of conversations from years ago. But so Ryan, the floor is yours.
So would it be possible to promote my colleague? It looks like they weren't able to be didn't get an email. So would you mind promoting Lithia back, which is actually Andrew Cantu, my colleague. And if you don't mind, we're also going to change the order so that he'll go first with the PCE proposal first, and then I'll talk about Fresh immediately after that.
Okay, so I just clicked on allow to speak for Lithia. So let me know if you are able to. I see you on my screen.
Let's see. And is he allowed to share his screen?
I don't know. That's not something
I'm here. I'm here.
You're here, but can you share your screen?
Let me try. Can you see?
Oh, perfect.
Okay, great. Can everyone see the screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. My name's Andy Cantu. I'm a planner with the Manhattan office with Ryan. I am here to present our proposal, the city's proposal, for a citywide text amendment to allow health and fitness facilities like gyms and spas as of right in more areas of the city. And the purpose of this text amendment is really to provide health-related amenities to more communities and hopefully cut some red tape for small businesses, especially during this really critical post-pandemic economic recovery period. And just to sort of set the stage, I'll be giving just a very quick overview of the proposal, give you some background and history of the current special permit regime so you have some context, then discuss what the specific challenges this proposal is attempting to address, get into some details of the proposal itself, and then give you a quick timeline for implementation. So as most of you know, or may not know, because I understand that CB12 doesn't actually see that many BSA special permits regularly.
We see a fair number of BSA special permits.
Okay, good.
Very much.
Good. So you're aware of this. You know what you're talking about. So, you know, in order to operate a gym or a spa or a licensed massage therapy studio in the city, you have to obtain a special permit from the BSA. And all of these uses fall under the umbrella term in zoning speak of physical culture or health establishments, or PCE. So I'll be using that term regularly throughout the presentation. There are a few limited areas of the city, mostly special districts like the Special Inwood District, where you can open a PCE without obtaining a special permit. But in most cases, a special permit is required. And even if businesses wanted to apply for a special permit, they aren't allowed along many local commercial streets, including areas where we allow other local service and retail uses. So for example, a lot of those C1 commercial overlays along Broadway and Amsterdam, businesses aren't even eligible to apply for the special permit, much less get permission to operate. And so even when you are eligible, the process of obtaining a permit is extremely costly and time consuming for businesses. And a lot of these businesses have really been hurt significantly by the pandemic. And we just want to make sure that you know, they have the ability to open and meet the growing demand for neighborhood health-related amenities. So health and fitness facilities impacted by the proposal include, you know, the range of facilities that we're all really familiar with, from those larger commercial chains like Blink or Planet Fitness or New York Health Clubs, to the smaller independent gyms that exist along your more sort of local streets. Studios like martial arts or yoga or aerobics or Pilates, things like that. And also, you know, a real range of more sort of therapeutic and wellness businesses like spas and licensed massage therapy. So how did these rules really come about in the first place? And why are PCEs regulated differently from really any other local retail or service use in the city. So as Wayne mentioned, in the 1970s, in response to concerns about commercial sex within, quote unquote, health clubs or massage parlors, the special permit was created to require health and fitness related businesses to undergo criminal background checks from the Department of Investigations before receiving approval to operate. And at the time, New York really didn't have the wide range of commercial gyms and fitness facilities that we're now very familiar with. Gyms were sort of this, sort of niche activity, whereas now they're ubiquitous and millions of us go to gyms and spas regularly. I mean, not me personally, but others do. There were some large chain, nonprofit health clubs like the Y and community centers that offered exercise classes, but it was never really anticipated that, thousands of overwhelmingly legitimate businesses like Pilates and yoga and rock climbing gyms and things like that would need to get special permits to operate. And obviously things have changed significantly over the last 40 plus years since the special permit was created. For one, there's been a significant, overwhelming growth in the health and fitness industry, and also the desire for communities to access these amenities. And again, we found that these amenities are overwhelmingly legitimate and valued by the neighborhoods that they're located in. And regulations around massage therapy have changed. Massage therapists are licensed health professionals by the New York State Education Department, and a registry of all massage therapists is available online. But like I mentioned, these businesses continue to be uniquely regulated through zoning, placing significant barriers on businesses. The special permit typically takes at least 6 months to be granted and often costs businesses between $30,000 and sometimes $50,000 in fees to architects and attorneys to go through that process. In addition, the special permit isn't applicable in most C1 districts, like I mentioned, meaning that gyms and spas are not allowed in locations where we allow things like restaurants and laundromats and grocery stores, all of these other amenities that we expect to be provided in neighborhoods. And finally, at a time when vacancy rates are really high along a lot of retail corridors, we just want to ensure that our zoning regulations allow for a diversity of businesses to occupy storefronts, which in turn, helps activate those corridors and makes them safer and more vibrant. So over the past 2 decades, special permits for gyms and spas have been issued disproportionately in the Manhattan Central Business Districts and Western Brooklyn and Queens. The darker areas in the map, the darker blue, show where the largest concentrations of special permits are located. And by making it easier for these businesses to open, we're hoping that this will be especially impactful for those sort of smaller independent businesses to open farther from the city core and serve more neighborhoods. And this proposal is also consistent with a lot of the recommendations from major strategic plans that the city has issued in the past few years, including One NYC and the Small Business First reports. And again, the special permit requirements have been slowly and steadily removed from neighborhood-wide rezonings. And so this proposal is really just expanding that policy citywide. I'm going to skip that. So what actually are we proposing? So We are proposing to remove the BSA special permit for all gyms, spas, and licensed massage therapy studios. Gyms and spas would be considered commercial uses that would be allowed as of right. So smaller gyms and spas, meaning those that are less than 10,000 square feet, would be classified under the zoning resolution as a use group 6 use and allowed in all commercial and manufacturing districts in the city, including C1 districts where gyms are currently not allowed. Gyms and spas over 10,000 square feet, unlimited square footage, would be classified as a use group 9 use, and there would be a slightly more limited geography of where those would be allowed. C2 districts and higher in all manufacturing districts. They would also be allowed in the highest density C1 districts, C1-8 and C1-9. And C1 overlays mapped within R9 and R10 residential districts, but I don't think any of those are applicable to CB12 actually, so that's nothing you have to worry about. And this distinction between smaller uses smaller than 10,000 square feet and uses larger than 10,000 square feet is just consistent with the way a lot of other commercial uses are treated in zoning, like clothing stores are treated similarly. So clothing stores under 10,000 square feet are treated as use group 6, over 10,000 square feet as use group 9. Licensed massage therapy. So massage therapy would be treated in the same way as outpatient medical uses and would be categorized as either a use group 4 ambulatory healthcare, which is outpatient healthcare and is a community facility use, or use group 6 healthcare offices, which is a commercial use. And this would allow licensed massage therapy studios in most residence districts, as well as all commercial and manufacturing districts. And just to be clear, because we have gotten this question before, massage therapy is still illegal to practice without a license. And unlicensed massage therapy would continue to be disallowed anywhere in the city, according to the proposed zoning. And although we've heard, a lot of overwhelming support for this proposal, sometimes the community, when reviewing BSA applications, does raise the issue of possible nuisances, such as noise and vibration from gyms. And, the BSA occasionally does impose conditions on permits related to those things. So to continue to address those concerns, the proposal will also include additional performance standards for noise and vibration. And performance standards are a very common mechanism. They're used primarily in manufacturing districts to make sure that things like noise, vibration, fumes, radiation, things like that are kept under a maximum threshold. So a subset of higher impact gyms, things that, have, weights that are, dropped on the floor a lot, lots of, rowing machines that would create, significant vibration. Those would be required to have an acoustical engineer certify with the Department of Buildings that the facility is designed to meet those performance standards before they actually receive a certificate of occupancy. And those provisions would apply to mixed use buildings, all mixed use buildings in commercial and mixed use districts. And lower impact uses like yoga or Pilates or things like that wouldn't need to demonstrate compliance. But again, all of these uses would still be subject to the noise code, the New York City noise code. So that is not being, messed with in any way. So how will this impact Community Board 12 specifically? So on this map, which is just looking specifically at gyms and spas less than 10,000 square feet, the areas in blue are districts where gyms and spas are now and today allowed as of right, where you don't need a special permit, and that would be unchanged under this proposal. And in orange, or I guess that's like a pink salmon color,
Yeah.
you, you have districts where a BSA special permit is currently required, and where under this proposal, gyms and spas under 10,000 square feet would be allowed as of right. And in purple, you have districts where gyms and spas are not allowed under any circumstances, not even with a special permit, and they would be allowed as of right there as well. And on this map, we're looking at gyms and spas of unlimited size and where they would be allowed as of right. And really the only difference between this map and the previous map is that gyms and spas over 10,000 square feet would not be allowed in those C1 commercial overlays that are mapped in, excuse me, the R7 and R8 districts that are prevalent across CB12. And on this map, we're looking at areas where licensed massage therapy studios would be allowed as of right, which as you can see is pretty much everywhere. And again, licensed massage therapy would be treated in the same way as you know, an outpatient medical, a doctor's office, things like that, which are currently allowed in most residential districts. So just to sort of wrap things up, the application was certified on May 19th, and the community board has until July 27th to submit your recommendation. We're tentatively scheduled for a public hearing in August and a likely vote in September, and hopefully a full approval by November. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? I participated in, you know, one of the briefings that was hosted a few weeks ago, and I asked a question that didn't get quite answered, but it seems that we are treating, you know, gyms and spas and licensed similar to how we're treating community facility uses. And so if current zoning would allow community facility use, and we have a lot of R7 to an R8, then it seems that gyms and spas would just follow along that. Is that an unreasonable way to think about the net impact of it, or what?
That's close. I would say that licensed massage therapy is treated, would be treated similarly to a community facility use. When it comes to gyms and spas and things like that, that would be treated under zoning closer to a local retail or local service use.
Okay. I see Sally's hand, and then I see Steve's hand.
Yeah, do you know how many of these facilities we currently have in Community Board District 12?
I do not, but that's a question I actually asked our team earlier this afternoon, and I will get that number for you soon.
Great, thank you.
We have 2 Planet Fitness. Steve.
Yeah, I need a little more clarity on your response to Wayne's question. So would the licensed massage therapists or any of these other uses be able to use what are now residential apartments?
So when it comes to, so, you know, if there were a residential unit in a, you know, commercial district, hypothetically, yes, it would be possible to convert a residential unit to a commercial use. That's no different from any other commercial district in the rest of the city. When it comes to licensed massage therapy studios, you know, I think where you would see this being more prevalent is, you know, ground floor spaces in, you know, residential buildings where you would likely see doctor's offices or, you know, things like that. You know, I don't think there's necessarily a risk of residential units above the ground floor being converted to gyms or spas or things like that.
Yeah, I think that was what Steve was probably going, you know, toward. There are a number of, you know, residential buildings, a lot of them along, you know, Fort Washington Avenue, but a lot of residential buildings where the ground floor apartment is used as a doctor's office. A lot of the buildings near the hospital have, you know, that, you know, so that was my question about, you know, community facility use. If you're on the 6th floor, you know, that's not really the issue. But I mean, this is also not something that is unique to Washington Heights and Inwood. There are any number of residential buildings throughout the city where you have, you know, ground floor medical or dental offices. And so the licensed physical therapy would be treated no different than any other doctor's office or ambulatory care / clinic.
Right. Yeah, you said that exactly right. And I don't want to get into too many specifics because it does really depend on where the building is located and what district it's in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like C1 commercial districts, for example, you know, you can't have commercial uses below the second, or sorry, above the second story. So there really is, you know, a very clear delineation between where you can have commercial uses or community facility uses and where you can have residential uses.
Right. Sally?
That's an old hand.
Oh, okay. Take it down. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? If not, so once again, you know, we don't meet in July, so we need to take care of this matter in June to get a resolution to the board, you know, for its June general meeting, so our comments can be submitted prior to the July 27th deadline. So is there a motion with regard to this text amendment?
I would, could I just ask one more question?
Sure.
I assume that these establishments would not actually be allowed within the 207th Street subway yard, although that's in Salmon.
Well, that's interesting. Yes, that's a train yard.
I mean, that can't possibly be a permissible zone, right?
I'm not actually super familiar with that area.
Yeah,
could you point that out?
It's at the northern. You see where that's like the blue wedge that's lined with like a blue serrated edge. Further up, part of that area is in fact the end where the A train is. Part of it's a train yard. So although the zoning technically may be X, the reality is it's a train yard. So unless
they can't have on-site massage therapy, how narrow-minded.
You could do that in the train cars, yes. But you know, so but Steve, unless they build a building on top of the train yard, which they can do, it's a train yard.
Yeah, as much as I'm sure employees would probably love that, I don't think it's gonna be possible.
All right, I would move that we support the text. Can we vote on both of them at the same time?
We could. So let's hold off the vote then.
Yeah.
And let's move to the fresh 2.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I will get back to you on that question about how many PCEs are in CB12.
Okay, and Andy, what is your last name again?
Cantu, C-A-N-T-U.
Okay, thank you much.
Thank you so much.
So,
just pulling up mine right now.
Okay.
We're almost there. And as you mentioned already, most of your group is quite familiar with Fresh because as you stated, in 2009 it was approved, so not a heck of a long time ago.
Yeah, but actually, I think 1, 2, at least 3 of our committee members probably, are not familiar with that one. So let's not get into great detail, but just don't assume everything.
No, for sure. I just may go through parts of it quickly. Feel free to stop me at any point. But by and large, Fresh is not changing a ton. A lot of what is being proposed is the expansion, which doesn't involve community districts like Community 12 as much. It's more about community districts that were not represented when Fresh first came out. So that's one half of it. And the second part is update. So I'll be focusing more on the updates, which are more pertinent to your purview. So let's see here. Sorry, I was trying to get related. So yeah, for a little bit of background, the Department of City Planning is proposing a zoning text amendment, which we're calling Fresh 2, to update the existing food retail expansion to support health program that provides greater incentives for neighborhood grocery stores to locate in underserved neighborhoods in the city. The purpose is incentivizing the construction of supermarkets in underserved areas of the city, which of course, in turn, increases accessibility to fresh, healthy foods for all 59 community districts in the city. So Fresh, as Wayne stated, was created in 2009 to encourage the construction of supermarkets in neighborhoods where studies have demonstrated a lack of fresh foods. This is done through a supermarket needs index. And as you can see in the map, that's kind of how things broke it down. There are 2 different kind of incentives through this program. One is discretionary tax incentives, which are provided through NYC EDC, and then zoning incentives, which are, of course, under our purview. So those are the ones I will be discussing more at length today. And so as far as the zoning incentives go, they are obtained through a certification process by the chairperson of the City Planning Commission. The chairperson is the one who has to certify the project. Below are then the incentives that are part of this package, or that can be a part of this package. The first being additional floor area. So in a mixed use building, and an additional square foot of residential floor area may be permitted for every square foot of fresh food store. That cannot be any more than 20,000 square feet. It can be as little as 6,000 square feet. That's as small basically as a fresh store can be. There are also modified regulations for M1 districts. Fresh store permitted as of right in these districts up to 30,000 square feet. Before they needed to seek, a developer would have to seek a special permit in order to build anything beyond 10,000 square feet. With that says because residences cannot be created in M1 districts, no residential units can be created there. They don't get the floor area ratio bonus, but they can build up to 30,000 square feet as of right. And then the third one is additional height, up to 15 feet. With that said, this is a little bit of a different and a more elongated process that it would be a full few public review process, which would be a CPC authorization. to increase the maximum building height up to 15 feet. So for any project that wants an increase of any height beyond what the zoning allows, they would need a CPC authorization, which means they would go through that ULURP process, the complete process. And then reduction in required parking isn't as pertinent to Community District 12, but it is something that a lot of community boards are concerned about in the outer boroughs. Since 2009, 27 fresh applications have been approved, and only 8 of these projects have been completed and occupied. A lot more are getting constructed right now, and there are quite a few pipeline. As you may know, there are currently no projects in Community District 12 that have been approved. A lot of them right now are in Brooklyn. And so kind of going back to why we're coming back with an updated proposal. The first part of it, again, is that an updated analysis in 2018 showed that many neighborhoods remain underserved by fresh food stores. And so the really main impetus for this proposal was to expand this proposal, to expand this program to encourage the development and retention of convenient, accessible stores that provide a full range of grocery products to a wider population. So the supermarket needs index, which takes into account a lot of different factors such as poverty, transportation, access to supermarkets, and many other variables, is measured and then gets you basically this map. As you can see in the green is where there is existing fresh zoning. So for Manhattan, that is community districts 9, 10, 11, and 12. And as stated right up front, the scope of this proposal is really twofold. The first part is expansion, so expanding the fresh boundary to additional neighborhoods of the city that illustrate a high supermarket needs index. And if I forget to say, it's SNI, so if I say SNI, that is what I mean, supermarket needs index. But then the second part is about a few updates. Since 2009, obviously, we've had a lot more information gathering, and so we're able to come with some updates that will make this a more effective process as well. So one of them is preventing saturation of supermarkets within fresh boundaries, modification of glazing, parking, and then some minor text cleanups. And I will discuss those one by one right now. So first, again, expansion of the fresh program. 11 more community districts are being proposed for expansion, none of which are in Manhattan. There are, 2 close to you in the Bronx, but in Manhattan right now, it will remain as 9, 10, 11, and 12 as far as the existing fresh zoning incentives. Here is a map of the applicability. What the space that isn't in green is determined by the supermarket needs index. They say there isn't a high need relative to the rest of the city and based on this coding, but by and large, the overwhelming share of Community District 12 is eligible for both the tax incentives, but and also the zoning incentives as well for fresh,
including the subway yard.
I mean, yeah, technically, if maybe in a very far off future.
Okay.
We're going to ask Steve Simon to behave.
It's a fair question. The preventing saturation of fresh supermarkets. So this is something that we haven't seen in Manhattan, and we really haven't seen by and large, except really in Bed-Stuy. That's where this has been an issue so far, is since the adoption of the program in 2009, we have seen a concentration of applications in specific regions, which really right now is Bed-Stuy. So this hasn't been a huge issue, but so that this never becomes an issue anywhere else either. The proposal is that within a half-mile radius, the sum of additional residential floor area not exceed 40,000 square feet. So what that means, if say there is a fresh food store that is 10,000 square feet, that means that there can only be 30,000 remaining. So that could be 2 stores, that could be one that is 20, one that is 10, it could be 3, whatever it might mean. But at the end of the day, it would still be no more than 40,000 square feet within a half-mile radius of each other. This is for a few reasons. One, it can lead to unanticipated development of buildings that is a little bit different than the intent. A bigger part of it also is just the competition between a lot of these new supermarkets that are trying to provide fresh products as well. So that is kind of the first update in this provision, is just that there is a cap at how much square footage of fresh supermarkets can be within a half-mile radius of each other. This second is a modification of glazing requirements for conversions, and for conversions only. So currently, the current provision is 50% of ground floor surface area must be transparent. If it is an existing building that they look to redevelop, then we would make it be 30% of ground floor surface area to be transparent, largely because requirement is just really difficult and costly for a conversion project. Obviously, knocking down wall to then make that transparent is a lot to ask. New buildings would still, though, have to meet that glazing requirement. So this would only be for conversions. And then some other clarifications and modification. Just at least 6,000 square feet of grocery store must be contiguous and located on the same floor to guarantee better accessibility. That has been a big thing that we ask for with all applicants too, is making sure that their ADA requirements are met. Redefine distribution of products in the fresh store to make sure that there's an adequate percentage of perishable and non-perishable food items, while also providing some flexibility. And then the restrictive declaration process that do not increase residential floor area will be exempt from the restrictive declaration requirement. This is because what is true for any supermarket that is built as of right, but fresh, we had put that in, and that doesn't really make sense if it is already an as of right use. With that said, if they do, if the height is different, then they would still require that restrictive declaration. The project timeline, it did certify in May, on May 19th as well, like the PCE that we saw before, and it is now with you all until July 27th. And then we'll go, and we expect to hopefully have this all accomplished with City Council in November or December of this year. So with that, I will take any questions.
Steve?
Yeah, I have, my question is that the limitation on, I believe it was not having more than 40,000 square feet for X number of supermarkets within a certain area. That only applies to supermarkets that are benefiting through the fresh zoning, this fresh zoning initiative.
That's correct.
So that if supermarkets want to open up in a neighborhood and do so without these incentives, there is no limitation.
That is correct. They would still, if they're as of right, they are still allowed to do so. That's correct.
Yeah. All right. My sense of what was happening, or what is happening in Bed-Stuy is, and this is like going back to 1980s and 90s, where buildings were not being built because they made financial sense. They're being built in order to get the tax losses. Here you have buildings that are or supermarkets that are being built not because there's a market need for the square footage, but because there is an FAR benefit. You basically can move your residential space up one level, which makes it more attractive. And if you happen to end up with supermarket space for which there's no demand, well, that's just the cost of doing business. So my sense is that's one of the reasons why they want to spread it out. So you're not just hitting one area with lots of new buildings with, in theory, supermarket space that then ends up being vacant because there's no demand for it.
And can you get the 30,000 additional square feet, and but then you can only go up another 15 feet in height? You would have to have a pretty large site, would you not, in order to fit 30,000 square feet, just one additional floor?
But the 30,000 applies to M1 districts.
Yeah, and the maximum would be only 20,000 square feet, but it certainly was still, it's still a large amount. So I understand your question. And it would depend on the envelope. There's a lot of enough projects depending on envelope where they could certainly get that increased FAR without doing height. But if they did ask for any additional height beyond what is currently permitted in that zoning district, they would have to get an authorization, which would be the full Euler application cycle.
So where would they put the 20,000 additional square feet? Do you then eliminate like the backyard requirement? I mean, how do they expand in the footprint of a site and then only be able to go up one floor?
I think there would be some leniency with that. I can check in exactly what. I'm just at the moment. I mean, it's determined by the envelope, but I can get you like concrete answer on
Yeah,
it.
I mean, but conceptually, Steve, if you've only got a 10,000 square foot site,
right,
it's difficult for you to get a 20,000 square foot store, but the store needs to be at least 6,000. So the size of the store would need to make sense given the size of the site. But what I think the 15 feet is getting at, and we talked about this, a couple of years ago, is when you take into account the HVAC equipment that has to be in a supermarket and the sight lines and other things, the typical floor to ceiling height for a residential building doesn't make sense. So, you want the supermarket to have a higher floor to ceiling, but then you don't want to take away from the residential above. So basically the residential is held harmless. So you can get up to 15 feet on the ground floor for the supermarket without saying that, okay, now you've hit the sky exposure plane and you lose a half a story of residential.
Yeah, I just wish we had the problem of having too many applications for these fresh benefits. I wish we had too many people wanting to open up supermarkets in Washington Heights and Inwood.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing to wish for, but
I wish, well, it would be better than what we have now, perhaps. But I support the expansion of this program to other communities in New York City.
I see Sally's hand.
Sorry, have there been any applications under the old fresh program in Community Board District 12?
So there have not been any certified. There are a number of people that there have been development teams that have come our way, and so some you may see some in the not so distant future. And with these updates, that wouldn't really change too much for them, especially since the biggest provision is that saturation provision, and since there are none currently in Community District 12, that isn't a huge worry for current applicants. But to answer your question more succinctly, there are no certified applications in Community District 12 at this point.
But I would guess with the rezoning of Inwood, you will see an uptick in applications.
Not necessarily. It depends on whether or not they want to do the supermarkets. Although, Sally, there have been a couple of projects that have come before land use and the community board where we have brought to their attention the old fresh or the current fresh program and suggested they look at it to provide, for much needed supermarket space without taking away from the residential they can build above.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Are there any other questions, comments?
I move that the committee support both of the text amendments.
Is there a second? I see Vivian's hand, but you should say it. You have to unmute yourself. You're still muted.
I'm unmuted now, am I not?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, so committee members in favor, please raise your hand using the raise hand function.
And we're voting on both of them,
We're
right?
voting on both of them as requested. 1, 2, 3, let's stop Bob camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed or abstaining? You can take your hands down, please. For board members, those in favor?
I'm going to abstain from the first one and vote in favor of the second.
Okay, I'm not quite certain how to do that, but so you're abstaining on the physical culture?
On the gyms and whatever else,
Yeah.
and massage parlors, yes. And I'm voting yes on the grocery stores.
Basically, you arithmetically have to make 2 vote totals.
Yep, I got that, thank you.
Right, but I thought I would add that anyway.
Yeah, and are there any members of the public who would like to vote? If so, please, raise your hand. I see one is that in favor? Okay, so you can take your, wait, I see someone else. Let me go to attendees. So there are 2 in favor. Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you much. Thank you, Ryan. And if you can send me the presentation for reference and have the other presentation sent, that'll be great.
Yep, no, I'll make sure to do it tomorrow, and I think Andy will get you that answer for you as well.
Very good, very good. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? At 10:07, is there a motion to adjourn?
Wade, before we adjourn, I just want to make sure that we follow up and get a copy of the Columbia Community Benefits Agreement.
I already asked Sandra Harris to send that to me.
I know, I just want to reiterate the point that we need to review it, and there's a cogent comment in the Q&A or the chat asking whether or not the agreement is enforceable in any way, and I think we need to take a close look at it.
Well, if it wasn't enforceable 10 years ago and being extended, it's not enforceable now. But I mean, so we'll look at it. But the point is, yes, we did ask for a copy of whatever was already sent to the office that has not yet been shared with us. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Good night, all. It is 10:08.
Wow.
Well, we had a long agenda, but we got stuff done, and c'est la vie, c'est la guerre.
All right. Happy summer.
Happy summer. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Omar, good to see you again.
Thanks, Steve.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jim.